Welcome everyone to tonight's online community forum. I'm Pam Duncan. I am the President and CEO of Metropolitan Development Council, and I am joined today by my good friend and colleague, Twyna Nobles, President and CEO of the Tacoma Urban League, with whom we are partnering for this ongoing series of conversations. We are also joined by Amanda Westbrook, who will serve as our moderator throughout tonight's conversation.
Thank you, Pam.
I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Pam. And also thank you, Senator Nobles, as I call her now, because that's just what I call her. Tonight's conversation is the 20th in a series of discussions where we are diving in to the differences and the different ways that COVID-19 is impacting Tacoma and Pierce County. Tonight, we'll have a discussion about how COVID-19 continues to impact our local economy and education. Please join me in welcoming tonight's guests. Farron Johnson of Greater Tacoma Community Foundation. Welcome, Farron.
Good to be here.
It's great to have you here. We are also joined by Dr. Kim Washington Watson. She is the Manager of Education and Employment for MDC. Thank you, Dr. Washington, for being here.
You're welcome. I'm the director of that program.
There we go. Well, thank you. Yes, director. And all of you, including Pam and Twyna and our great tech support, Rob. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all. And I want you to know that we'll be here for the community throughout the COVID-19 crisis with new conversations with the purpose every Monday evening at 5 p.m. The most important message throughout this series of conversations is that there is hope for our community. Our focus is to create space in each meeting to talk about resources and things we all can be doing to help get through this pandemic.
We would like to take a moment to acknowledge that this meeting is being held and conducted on the indigenous lands of the Puyallup people.
It's beautiful.
Throughout today's conversation, excuse me, you can submit questions to be addressed by our speakers using the Q&A function in Zoom. We cannot promise that we'll have time to consider every question, but we will do our best to get through the list in the allotted time.
And as a housekeeping matter, and for the security of everyone on this call, everyone's mic has been muted and we are not allowing everyone to share their faces on video. We have also disabled the chat function, so please submit your questions to our moderator through the Q&A function.
Well, let's start this. I often like to quote Pam because Pam has the best verbiage. When she says great things happen when there is a moment of silence. And that has been the premise of how we have worked these series, in the sense that as panelists, you can let the spirit and your intuition and your intelligence move you to answer when you'd like to. So the first thing that we always do, and we want to check in with Dr. Kim, Farron, and of course, Pam and Senator Nobles. How are you holding up today? And I also want to ask, how is your heart?
I'm holding up good. I was glad to see the sky this weekend. It's just, you know, all the things that's going on right now. And then to add that you have just a smoky scenery that just puts a damper on things. So it was great to just see a part in the sky and be able to see something different. And that just helps me think towards the future that, you know, all of this stuff that we're going through will pass. And we will get to the other side of it better and stronger and being able to work together. So my heart is hopeful. And so I'm, what we call, what the kids say, I'm in the green zone. I'm happy about that. So it was just good to get a peek of what it looks like when things clear.
Well said, Farron.
I also feel I always want to take a step back and just look at the situation as opposed to acting on it like I normally do. I normally just act because I'm a mother. I feel so a part of being an integral part of it. I want to do something, and I have the energy to do it. But then as I start really looking at what's going on and telling myself the truth about what's going on, I just need to sit in resolve so that I can heal. And that healing has helped me help others because they depend on me. And that healing helps me just come to a place of resolve and hope. So I'm very hopeful.
That was beautiful, Dr. Kim. Thank you.
Like Farron, I was just so happy to see the sun this weekend. It felt as though what we had experienced the week prior was something that just wasn't supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are so many things this year that we could say that about, but that last week just felt like we had just been, I don't know, put on punishment, put on timeout. I don't know, but I was just so happy to see that golden orb in the sky on Saturday, and it just bolstered my spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize how much I needed that until I saw the sun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was beautiful, Pam. Thank you.
And I'm excited. I mean, last week was our first full week of remote learning, and I have 3 kids who are remote learning, and I'm excited for tonight's conversation since this is, a major topic in our community, how to help us as a community of one be successful in this age of COVID and help our families and students to obtain the resources that they need. I'm also excited for the season change. I think tomorrow is the first day of fall, and I love all the seasons for different reasons, but a new season is here and I'm excited. I'm excited for candy corn and fall scents and pumpkin spice and pumpkins and the changing of the leaves. And, I'm optimistic for the next season of our life experience during this unprecedented time. I have been very careful not to ask seriously, like, what can happen next? Like, I don't want to know. I remain hopeful that with every season comes change and new blessings. And so I'm here for that in ways that we will stay glued together as a community during a very difficult time.
Thank you, Tawana. So the first question I would like to open up with is, a lot is happening with our kids being back in virtual school, as you've mentioned this month. So what have you seen or heard about the virtual learning experience in the first 2 weeks of school? And I will let you join in as you feel.
I mean, I have a hilarious story for the first week because I have a granddaughter who's, in kindergarten. And so she started virtual learning, and the teacher was doing a check-in with everyone. And they were like, hey, Erin, how you doing, this morning? And she's like, my mom's standing in the kitchen drinking a grown-up drink. And the teacher's like, oh, wow, that's great. And my daughter's standing in the kitchen and she's like, what in the world did she say that for? Like, they might think I'm really drinking a grown-up drink. So it's this space of like, there's going to be a lot of parent appearances in that virtual space right now because kids just say what comes first to their minds, and so it was just hilarious that she, jumped into the conversations and she's like with the kids, for the record, this is not a grown-up drink. This is a protein drink, so there was, you have to find humor in some of this because you're going to have the hiccups, the tech, and especially in the younger spaces, which is where, my work concentrates on is the K through 5th grade space. And, just gonna say some things, and so I just think that the first couple of weeks was really all around just re-engagement, and I heard that a lot, not just only within my own, home and my grandchild, but even our high schoolers and middle schoolers needed a minute to adjust. It's a different space, being completely online learning versus remote learning, and talking with a couple of our high schoolers who are, running START students. And so they decided to go specifically into the online space where they're settling, in a little better. But in the remote learning space, there's just still the choppiness of the tech piece, access. And we could talk a little more about that a little later. But that's something that I'm hearing, as far as the 2 weeks that, there were some funny moments, and there were some tough moments where folks, weren't able to get access. But it sounds like it's starting to calibrate a little better.
Thank you, Sharon, for that story. That's classic.
From my focus, I'm a little concerned. Nationally, or even our expected enrollment for public school was over 1,147,000, and actually enrollment is only 1,100,000. So in terms of enrollment, where are the lost kids? Where are they? Why aren't 45,000 students enrolled and expected? You can say, well, maybe they tried other education, maybe they did that, but then that would just be a filler statement. I'm looking at how we work with the whole family and look at how we look at enrollment, because even if you're looking at statistics from Tacoma Public School, those statistics are from last year. They're not from this year. National education statistics tells you about the predictions of what's going on and what do they predict next year. And so in terms of enrollment, in terms of what they predicted that we're going to be in enrollment in Washington State, that's very concerning, because then you have what we're looking at are students in rural areas who don't have access to technology, do not have hotspots, and have given up. And so my thoughts are with the forgotten child.
That's a deep one. That like knocks the parental wind out of you. And before I ask this next question, we have a question in the chat that is so right on with what we're talking about, and especially what you said, Dr. Kim. And this is the question. The students who need the most support seem to have the least access. I've heard of students camped out in fast food parking lots and on library benches in order to have the internet access to do their schooling. Internet access is a critical utility, and many lower income families do not have access. How can the importance of this be stressed and access be equitable? We want to say thank you to our anonymous person who put that in there. So I'm going to open that up for the group.
Yeah. Broadband should be a public utility for sure, because education is essential. And if we're going to pivot our students into a remote space, online space, we need to make sure they have what they need to be successful in that. And when it comes to the racial equity piece, that access for all is going to get at that. But if you focus on, just like that question that was posed in the chat, if you focused on the most vulnerable and focus on those gaps, all boats are going to rise. And I think that's the piece where the working together, better together, being able to talk with our, state representatives, our council. I know Tawana does a lot of that good conversation around that. She was already speaking that around, like, we can't just be plugging up holes. We can't have, folks having spotty access, and, some hotspots work, some don't. You can't keep plugging up holes with that, because that gets tiring and it burns everybody out. But broadband as a public utility, which has also been something that I've really been trying to push, that to me is the larger conversation, and who's in those spaces having those conversations around that, to lobby for that, to advocate for that. Because I hear there's conversation, but, unless we got about 10 Tawanas in that space, that can help us push, forward some advocacy, like we need to have some of that representation of our most vulnerable communities, our parents that are in those rural areas, our providers who are trying to support, our teachers who are trying to support. So I do think that's a huge issue. I don't think we're gonna get at it by one-offs. It's definitely gonna take alignment, and it's gonna be depending on, like, how do we approach our county, around that, because it's not just Tacoma Public Schools, it's Franklin Pierce, it's Bethel, it's Puyallup, it's, all of those spaces. And so how do we align that so that it frees us up as folks who are semi-direct service, or our closest or proximity to the ground to try to support virtual learning? How do we, advocate to those other spaces that are bigger conversations, to be able to push that through and find out, is that a conversation? And if so, what's happening in that? Because it does feel very slow moving, to get the resources to our communities that need them the most. So I absolutely, agree with Dr. Kim. I agree with that chat. Like, that is a huge push, but that's going to be like everyone from every sector pushing that, because having internet access is something for all of us. It's not just school students, it's also folks in health that need to maybe do a teleconference and have spotty access. And I know our focus is education, but it blends into that if we're talking about how we re-engage students when it comes to mental health, and they've been coming into the education space and there's trauma, all around. So that access piece is huge. But I feel like it's going to take all of us to push that up to a larger conversation, like to our Senator Tawana's future senator, to help us push that advocacy forward, to see what we can do with that. So that's just my thinking on that right now. Yes, that's a huge issue and a huge gap, and we're hemorrhaging there. And we need to get some resources to that as soon as possible before we bleed out of that with that. So that's just kind of my thinking on that.
I want to jump in on the heels of what Farron said. She mentioned a lot of school districts that naturally come to mind when you think about Pierce County, and we don't necessarily think about across the bridge, but the Key Pen is another area that is greatly impacted. And as you elevated, Farron, it's not limited to the students who can't have access. I mean, we're talking about households, everyone in a household who's impacted when you're talking about telehealth and everything else that we are now doing virtually. There is a pending op-ed that will be published, don't know when, but Katie Baird from UW Tacoma, Cynthia Stewart of the League of Women Voters, and I are elevating about the issue, the necessity of broadband to be considered a utility. And because we are seeing all of these things that really, as with everything else with COVID-19, things get daylighted, the inequities and the disparities in our communities are made even more evident during these times. So echoing what you've already heard.
Dr. Kim, would you like to add something to that?
No, I kind of like to contemplate and come back to that with some more conversation. I really feel like this is a conversation we're having between each other, it looks like comfortably. And if you don't mind, I'd like to come back to it if I have something that I want to say that's substantive about it.
Absolutely, Dr. Kim. And thank you for knowing yourself so well. I love that response. I want to move on as we start talking about education. What are we hoping to get into tonight is to talk about what parents and guardians can do to ensure their children are able to succeed in virtual schooling. So I know that everybody on this call has interest or has children or knows children that are going through virtual schooling. So I want to put this to our panelists first. What are some of the general tips as parents and students continue to navigate this new type of schooling? In your experience would be really important for parents to know to help those students succeed, because many parents have never taught their children like this before. And I think all of us on this call are educators in some form. So I'm going to start with you, Farron, because Farron, you are in the mix with, it seems like, a multitude of ages of children.
I mean, you know, if I were to just say 3 top tips right now from what I've just been seeing, you know, in the spaces. One of them is just as a parent, like, we're going to have to be nimble. And I say that, you know, as a grandparent who had to support, you know, my kindergartner in her remote learning during the summer when we signed her up for STEM programming. So being nimble and being able to be okay with sometimes not always having all of the answers, but having like a cheat sheet of like touch points, help desk, you know, having your student schedule, class schedule in front of you so you understand what is the flow, reviewing that before the student jumps on, helping the student kind of do some preparation the night before, you know, helping to set a structure or a pace, particularly when you're in the K through 5th grade, which is, again, is that is the space that I'm in the most right now when it comes to figuring out how do we support parents. But knowing where your touch points are, like, for instance, Tacoma Public Schools has a great resource, a family support center where TPS parents can go on and understand how to navigate teams, which is one of the platforms that students learning is on, how to navigate the learning management system. Because like you said, Amanda, like, not everyone is tech savvy, you know, and so there has to be like the communication and messaging and supports on those websites need to be digestible for parents, you know, broken up into small bites around if you're in asynchronous learning, which is learning independently, here's what your student should be doing, here's where they should be accessing. The Family Support Center gives parents those tips. So there are a lot of things that, you know, and I can speak for just my experience with Tacoma Public Schools where they have a lot of those resources already. And I just think sometimes parents move so fast and there's so much going on, they forget that they have access to that right at their fingertips. And it's really good resources, helps you navigate. So for me, you know, first understand what your child is plugging into. What is their schedule? What is a structure or flow that you're going to support your student learner, you know, as they're going throughout the week? The other piece is like having like a cheat sheet, making sure that your babies are set up before they, you know, get ready to get into the space. They have everything that they need. And I know that's not always, you know, possible for everyone, you know, but I'm just saying for parents who really are trying to figure out, like, I'm going to do my very best to lean in and make sure my student has what they need, just your general needs, to be able to be on point and be ready for learning. Those are just things that I've seen, you know, a lot of parents do that just help them set their student up, you know, successfully for that day, but also for that week. but also knowing that you have resources that you can link to. And that website has FAQs on there, a lot of frequently asked questions by parents. So a parent may be asking questions and not knowing that that question's already been asked and answered, on that family support piece. So I think that being able to access that, parents being able to use that as a resource and reference is key and important. And so I'll stop there because I know I'm, talking a lot, but, those are just some like really ready tips that you can do to get your student ready for their day and their week to be successful. Because no student likes to, get online and not be prepared, and in my, just in my experience, it's just helpful to help your student get on a structure or a schedule with that. And knowing, what your student's class schedule is, who the touch points are, have a cheat sheet, and know that there's some resources on the website. That's the best space to go to. And a lot of times, the school is really good with partnering with other information. So there's other links to outside resources from that Family Support Center website on TPS that you can get additional support. So find that center space, parents, guardians, to get the resources that you need directly from the school. And then there's ways that you can access, externally to get additional supports if you need that. But it's just important to know, like, what are your kids plugging into? What's their schedule? And how can you help set them up for success for their day and their week for that? So I'll stop there if anyone else wants to add something in there.
Thank you, Farron.
Yep.
I love hearing your voice, Farron. You sound good. I'd like to also include, because I served a short time as a counselor in Tacoma Public School, I like to talk to the idea of to those parents who have students with learning disabilities who don't know how to handle them, and who just learned that these students have, or their child has a learning disability, and there's no help for them to understand how to work with them. That's very difficult when you have a child that may have a learning disability that you don't understand. And then instead of being punitive about it, you would be punitive about it, and instead of seeking help. And so that would be a option for me, because when you're serving these students right now, especially, one of the things that I've learned that worked very successfully is that you have to consider the whole family. You can't just look at the student and say, oh, okay, this is what you're going to do today. The family goes through such an impact in being all together, having different learning styles, and just being able to cope with this time. So I think that being able to deal with those mental health issues and having parents learn how to embrace them in a way that's loving, and so that they could share, is also something that we would consider now.
Well said, Dr. Kim, very well said. So there's a question in the chat that I think is very, very good, and we're gonna talk about it here. And the question is this: how is this different for parents of students who are in Tacoma Online versus remote learning? And first we should say, what are the differences, and then how is it different for the student and for the family experience?
So online learning is very similar to you going to college and taking online courses. You're going through a different type of platform to access it. It's not specifically connected to your school, though there may be TPS teachers who are in the space specifically. And again, I liken it to students who are in Running Start and they're part-time at TCC or part-time at Evergreen or wherever, and they have access an online learning management system. That online space feels better for a student who can really, really operate in an independent learning space or has the support at home to be able to. A remote learning is eventually you're going to pivot back down to the in-person space. That's what remote learning means. So you're still connected to your school, you're still enrolled, at your school. And as soon as times get better, if there's a time to pivot, that student's going to be able to pivot, where an online student is not going to be able to pivot quickly like that. They'll have to ride the whole semester out before they can pivot into an in-person, or the whole year out before they could pivot into an in-person space. So that's the difference. One is going to go back to an in-person space. One is going to stay completely online. Remote is connected to your school specifically. Online is still connected to TPS, but you won't have the same teachers from your school in that space. And so that's the difference. Hopefully that answers the question a little.
I think it does. Dr.
Great.
Kim, would you like to add anything to that?
I think she handled it wonderfully.
So as we look at the education system, it sounds like that online school this fall is much different than what our students experienced when COVID first arrived last spring. What do you think some of the improvements are?
Well, I think with anything, like wasn't nobody prepared, for this. So we had to hit the ground running and just put something down, and in the process of that, you learn, oh man, there was some missed opportunity for communication here to really help, parents get a grasp on what the next steps are. Oh my gosh, that flow or that schedule didn't line up the way, it needed to. Oh my gosh, no kids have laptops, so that first end of March was, that was like stressful, because it's like you weren't sure who had access to a device and who had access to internet and was it aligning, were kids going to be able to finish, their classes. I talked with a couple of high schoolers who, were afraid that they weren't able to get online to take their SATs, their, seniors, and trying to get, that piece because they didn't have access or a device, or there were certain class projects that were due. And they didn't have access to be able to complete those, and could they get an extension? And so that end of March or that mid-March time was just a time of, oh my gosh, like we want folks to be safe, but there were so many other things that we just didn't have time to really vet. We just had to move, and put some things on the ground. Now, hindsight with that, now we worked with Green Trike and some of our community partners that stood up emergency day camps, and got a feel for what it felt like to navigate in person at a modified way, for students. And so we learned from that, working specifically with TPS around that and around how to navigate that. So there was some strengthening and improvement there. Then we phased into summer, where even though that's not direct instruction or explicit instruction, we still are working with TPS students, and 253 students in that space. So again, there's some online ELO virtual, programming happening. There's some summer programming happening. So how students are able to access, we learned from emergency day camps to help support that summer space. Now, as we transition into fall, where we've learned a lot around what needs to calibrate, how schedules need to align, what communications need to go out, when communication needs to go out, making sure that resources are available for folks so they're not looking at 50 million different platforms to access information, but they have a one space where they can go, and get what they need. And I think a lot of that took a minute for it to calibrate and for it to align. And do we have more work to go? Yes, because this is like hitting a moving target right now. We are at the I don't want to say mercy, but COVID is dictating us right now around to show up in a space. Don't have that nimbleness, but learn, when we did try it this way and what didn't work, here's what we're taking that works into this next phase, 2.0, of what virtual learning could be, then 3.0 of what virtual learning. So each time we try we calibrate and readjust. We're learning something new. And I think that the difference between March versus now is we hit the ground, and we had to learn what we had to learn to understand really how to support our families and our students better before fall, hit, knowing if we were going to be in person or virtual. So we had to test both spaces, at the same time to figure out like what's going to be a good fit. So for me, it was a test and try and improve and crash and fail and, rebuild and try something different. And each time, it gets a little better. And so just, my perspective of just being, space and trying to plan what it looks like for expanded learning opportunities in the virtual space, we are able to do some great alignment with partnership. And I think that's the other piece that is working towards our favor as far as how we support our students moving forward. Is like not one entity can do this on their own. Like school can't do this on their own. Community partners can't do it on their own. Parents can't do it on their own. We have to like align and be in conversation, and community with to be able to do this, where voice shows up, and I think that's the other piece. Sometimes in the midst of moving fast, trying to do something, we lose voices. We didn't get parent voice around this. The surveys didn't get, didn't really touch where we needed to, because there was folks that couldn't access the surveys online because they didn't have a device or, internet. So we missed a lot of data opportunity, by not being ready, to pivot. But that was something that we learned, and we're able to, now the next time around, we will implement that and make sure this voice is at the table, make sure this young person's voice is at the table, make sure this community partner is at the table, so that we can make sure that if we're wrapping around the whole child, everybody has what they need to wrap around the whole child. And that includes, our TPS folks, and it includes our community folks, our youth, and our parent voice. So to me, it's just every day it gets a little better. We're learning, even though we're like shooting a moving target right now, we know what we do know. And so if we need to pivot, we have some ideas on what it looks like on the ground. If we need to pivot back into the virtual space, we've tested that and we have some ideas on what that looks like. Not perfect, but it's better than at the end of March, when we were trying to scramble and figure out like what needed to happen and who could even access, and finish their year out, for school. So that's kind of just my thinking around, what has improved since that time.
I believe also one of the luxuries, if I could just pivot on what Farron is saying, is that we get to see the colleges prepare as well. So the colleges have eliminated some of the requirements that they need, Accuplacer and those SAT tests for some of the colleges, so that students can have a waiver. One of the things that we were able to do with our summer program were do the needs assessment, find out what the student needed, provide the necessities that they needed, and then give them a opportunity to take a course in a college. And from that, symbiotically, we were giving them an opportunity to learn an online platform, providing them with other options like college, because now the colleges are just as desperate as the schools in enrolling students. FAFSA has gone down tremendously. There is a national outcry for us to encourage people to apply for FAFSA because the FAFSA enrollment is down. And so now colleges are given incentives for those students in 9th through 12th grade. If they could pass ALEX and they can provide a writing sample, they don't need to be in high school. They don't need a graduation. They just need to come on and go to college. So they're providing other incentives for you to be prepared and available to take that next step without putting all of the fees and test requirements in place. So we are aligning, and we're aligning in a virtual way that's in competition with each other as opposed to being in partnership right now, because people are desperate for the money that those students can provide, regardless of what age they are.
That's a lot to think about. Very, very well said. So on that note, Dr. Kim, have you found that some students do better in a virtual school setting? And this is for Farron also, and if they do, how so? And then does that make you rethink that there may be some elements from virtual schooling that we should continue even when schooling becomes available in person?
As an online teacher and teaching for universities and colleges, I believe that the exposure to those elements, students are fantastic. They are much better than we are when we were growing up. They have much more technology. They are given these opportunities ahead of time so that they can catch up. Those students who do well online will do well online for the rest of their life. What happens sometimes, if you don't have the exposure, you can't keep up with your peers, you can't keep up with the class, you can't keep up with the timing of a course. That discourages students. So you have to be able to catch them in the net, and when you're a teacher, in order to give them another step push again, to do it again. There are going to be some students or some people that are not going to succeed. That you have to tell the truth about that. Who can those who can succeed, you give them, they will take all of what is necessary because they become hungry for more. They become so hungry, you can't give them enough to learn. So you keep giving them, but then you catch those ones who can't, to find out what other mechanisms will work for them, because they're not lost. They just may not be able to catch on as quickly as those online learners can and compete in order to stay in lockstep with a course that needs to be completed or so. We have to go back, thinking about how our learning and our force to accomplish a class or to complete a class could be expanded upon so that all learners that need more time to complete it can do that. So it's lots of things going on right now to compete with the one student who we really want to succeed.
Yeah, and I also think too, all of that. And I think also it has to do with the age of the student, because if I could snap my finger and COVID be gone, like K through fifth grade, be back in the classroom, because it's a different space when you're younger. I can see as we get ready to pivot back into a hybrid space where making that an option for, 8th through 12th, I'm not sure how our 6th, 7th graders are doing right now in the online space. I would have to, do some research on that, but I do talk with a lot of our high schoolers who each of them, some of them said, Ms. Farron, I really enjoy being online because I don't feel a lot of microaggressions in the classroom, talking now about our youth of color.
That's a good point.
This right now is our peer connection with one another. Because we don't have that in the space, but we actually don't miss the classroom live, because of that. And then just the temperature that we're in right now around, racism, they were would have just been heightened had they, tried to force and stay into the in-school space. So there's some relief, in not being in the in-school space for some of our high school students. But then on the other piece of it, you have, your K through 5th graders who, again, I use my granddaughter as an example, 10-minute attention span right now, and it's teachers who are, trying to help a young student navigate, I don't know where to click the link, Miss Farron, where's the link? And the teacher's like, the link is right here. Just move the mouse right here in front of you. It's 15 minutes of that, before you can even get into, the learning. So I would push, that when it's safe, and folks are feeling, okay, countywide around that, that yes, our younger students need to pivot back into that, in-person space, but give them some ELO virtual options, and see how they feel with that, and it not be a whole day of on learning, but it might be some things they plug into throughout the day, phase it in that way. And then, our high school students, maybe there's an option for them, moving forward. Say, COVID is gone and we're trying to figure out how do we reimagine school, and educate. Like, I think online should definitely be offered, as an option to Tacoma Public School parents if they want to do that, but in the upper levels, not so much in the younger spaces. That's just my thinking, and then just me personally, like I'm hands-on. I'm a different learner than a lot of my kids, who enjoy being by themselves, and like being in a space and are very independent students. They all did, ad and running start. They enjoy that, but that wasn't me, when I was in the space. And so I know, a lot of our young people who know their learning style, if they had to choose, some of them would choose, just like Dr. Kim was saying, some of them to choose. You catch those who are just going to shine in that online space and it's for them. And you catch those who are going to struggle and you give them a different option, when it's safe to be able to do that. So I think we need to continue it, and make it, part of how we evolve from here. Because school, education, school, how it looks, it can't go back to the same way. And I hope it doesn't, because we're able to flex and be nimble and serve the child and the families where they are, and support that way. So I would love to see it continue and us think, around what that could look like moving forward in the future of making online and virtual space just part of this is how we do it. This is how we learning space.
Dr. Kim, how has virtual learning impacted the work that is done in MDC's youth education programs in terms of working with students in Upward Bound and talent search programs?
Well, that's a good question. It has increased our opportunity to create a virtual platform that would educate the families, that would include the families, and it would share information it would share MDC's information with the whole family that's impacted. I think that when we were charged to actually by the Department of Education to put this virtual learning component together, we really did a fast turnaround with learning how to connect different services, creating virtual villages that we would enhance the whole family. And what worked well was this. There was 3 perfect things that really worked well. It was doing a needs assessment. From that needs assessment, creating a strategic plan of action to serve immediately. And then give incentive for them to come and use those services. That worked perfectly. When we started out, we were in COVID. We had 164 students who applied for the summer program. And we were concerned because 160 students, that was great amount to get, but how do we retain them? And we used PLU, created a virtual course. And what was magnificent is that we fed them all along the way. We asked their families every week, are you hungry? They said yes. We fed them on Fridays. And they were so grateful that they made sure the whole family completed the class. That was amazing because that whole family felt the virtual feel. And we were able to turn EOC, who works with adults, into those families to see how we could serve them as well. And so it really became something that now is morphing into a magnificent place for us to just rejoice, talk about MDC in so many different platforms, but serve those people we can serve. The whole family, feed them and give them educational nourishment so that they can become who they want to become. They need jobs right now. Many of these families are suffering because they need these jobs. And so to be able to provide them hope in the fact that we can get you to this particular point, we need your help to help you, but we'll get you there if you want to go, is what I think the virtual idea will be able. It's not over yet. We haven't strengthened it. We haven't mastered it yet. But what we're working on it. And we're working on it to a degree that would serve not only the clients that we have to serve, but it'll serve the whole entire program as well as the community.
I love that. That's the community, you know, that you know, when you have folks who are proximity to the work, you know, families, proximity to the students, you know, it's not just about learning. You know, it's very much that. It's how do you wrap around the whole child, you know, up with child, it's family, you know. A lot of these families have, you know, students who are siblings, you know, and so you got to think, you know, need larger term, bigger term, particularly when it comes to the virtual space, because there is an opportunity for lots more access. You know,
Excuse me.
We talk about access for students who necessarily won't be able to go to a person after school program, you know, but when we do pivot back into the space, how do we offer in-person ELO and virtual ELO for students who can't stay after school, you know, or have transportation? So this space is a lot of opportunity navigate, but we need broadband as a public utility. You know, there are certain things where we have to get at the gap, you know, the causing the barrier. So it's not just folks who can afford to be in that online space and be able to pay for quality. Quality is just part of that's a essential, whether you have or have not. Quality education, access to it, devices that work, you know, that is for anyone. Right. And I think that this space, it has given us the opportunity to advocate and push in a way from a community perspective, a parent perspective, a youth voice perspective that we've never been able to do before, because that system is a tough system, you know, to navigate, you know. And so here's this nimble space now, here's this opportunity, you know, to get in there and say, hey, how do we look differently at this? Where do we align? Where do we not? Where do we stay in our mission and visions? And where do we come in to support families, you know? And you just can't do that by yourself, you know, as one entity. You know, it's the MDCs, it's the Earthlings, it's the, you know, Black Parent Alliance, you know, it's KPs, it's all of these amazing partners that are providing the resource so our families and our young people can get what they need, and we meet them where they are, you know. Virtual space is another way for to have access, you know, if we can make sure that that's quality, you know, because if you can't afford it, you know, does that mean you don't get, you know, the type of broadband width as the next person who can, you know, that's equitable, you know. So that's the piece where even in this work with the virtual space, racial equity can show up so strong here, because this is a point of access that we can navigate as a county, you know, and make sure that everyone has access to that. And then we start, you know, saying, okay, where do we plug in? What does our organization do to plug in and support parents and families, and, you know, and even our teachers are stressing y'all too. You know, it's a lot on their plate. They're having to pivot every day. You know, one day they're going back to class, next day they don't know, you know, and so that's a whole nother stress. And so that's coming out in the classroom, right? When a teacher is feeling overwhelmed by things and trying to prepare and up all night, and then they get into the space and, you know, it's kids connect, you know. There is this whole area around, if we align there, that's going to set that equity space, so that now we can start saying, okay, here's our lane, here's what we do. Oh, we don't need to step over that. Peace Community Center is doing that for, this pocket of schools, in the virtual space or in the in-person space. So lots of opportunity for partnership and collaboration, which is going to take that, in order to get to the other side of this in a strong way, set our students up for success, our young people success, their families up for success as well.
I just want to jump in. Wow, I also really love listening. Actually, not just you, Farron, but both of you and your responses, because your passion is just like jumping out off of the screen. I thought about something going back to that question about the virtual learning setting and who that would really be benefiting. And I heard this a little bit touched on, but I think about those students who had been in the physical setting and getting bullied, and now they have, I believe, like a reprieve. I will say, I recognize that there is definitely a benefit to being in a physical space and the socializing that comes from that. And then there are some students who that was torture. That was a nightmare for them. So in that regard, I think there is definitely much to be said about the online learning, virtual learning.
Yeah, I think anxiety gone down. When you talk to particularly some of our middle and high school students around that bullying, microaggressions, feeling like they're not smart enough, students who have, special things that they need, in order for them to engage, a lot of that anxiety went down, when they moved into space. Still missing, like you said, Pam, still missing the socialization piece of it. But you're picking, what do I want to deal with? Racism, or I'll go hang out at the store with my friend on Saturday, And so the fact that our young people are thinking like that right now, they're thinking, I don't know if I want to be in this space because I don't feel like being bothered with that. That affects my learning, being racism, that affects me, so I'd rather do it this way. So like to have our young people giving that voice, that's powerful. And we open up a platform more to hear that, because you're going to hear more of that. If we were to do, some type of open conversation about it, like young people will hop on and tell you, that has been, the reprieve, from the space. So but that says a lot to us, as parents, as folks who love our young people and and believe racism has to go. That's something that we have to address, moving forward. Otherwise, how do we pivot and make sure that this great opportunity doesn't and we haven't dismantled some systems. We haven't torn down some systems that are blocking our kids from learning. Just think there's opportunity again in this space, in the virtual space, to do some really good work there, and not be left behind in that. So love it.
When I listen to that, Pam, I think about just having a safe place, that safe place, where not only I could absorb the information, but I have an opportunity to explore other ideas without being judged. A lot of times, when you're thinking about, I think when you're thinking about this, a lot of it turns out to be competition and, who can be the best. It's like taking that ego out of it and looking at people for who they really are and enjoying the magic that they were here to, they're here for a reason, and bringing that amazing thing out of them to make them look forward to the world, look forward to what's to come. If we wake up tomorrow, we have an opportunity to not only live in this COVID time, but we have an opportunity to do better. And and this is just our chance. I think one of the things about the TRIO program, along with working with some of the other partners, is it's an important program right now. And it's important because we have an opportunity to change it, to make it fit for how we work with students. We have a brilliant opportunity right now. And so do we look at the magic of what's coming up? Or do we look at the dissension? Sure, there's a lot of dissent. I wake up Black every day and just hope somebody will say, yeah, you're not going to be judged by your skin color. But hey, that I want you to know, I want people to know who I come in their light every day, that they're here for a magic reason. Magic reason. And they're already prepared. They're already ready in so many ways. And so how do then we promote what we have in a positive way so that everybody can, everybody could gain from what we have to give them. So that's where I'll leave it.
Mm.
So good.
You're right. So good. So you touched on this, Dr. Kim, so I'm going to bring it up. And that is, amidst all of this change that we have right now, and from your mouth to God's ear, if this could be a solution for bullying, and also as Farron has said, for microaggressions, what a beautiful salve we've given to those children. So I want us to look at this in terms of hope. And as we close this out, what is giving both of you and everybody on this phone call hope right now? Where do you see the silver linings in this situation?
Wow. Did you want me to start?
You can.
Because I can start. Like, I just think, just like I just previously said, when we get a chance to wake up in the morning, if we get another opportunity to make a difference, it's the onus is on us. It's on us right now to make this into this pandemic into a miraculous change of how we accept ourselves, how we look out for others, how we take on the social issues with grace and dignity. And we survive and we're victorious in it. And if we believe and just are grateful for those things we just have, all of the other stuff starts manifesting around us. Just being grateful for what we have. And I am so grateful for the opportunity to share right now with you, to be a part of this conversation, to be a part of the lives of so many of the people that I work with at MDC, all of the different things that we can provide there, the sensitivity of the clinical things that we do, the love that we have for each other, and what we do for using that for the community. I mean, I'm so glad to be a part of today because I know that there's a better tomorrow. I know there is. So it's just a matter of us knowing we have an opportunity. I'm getting ready to go to bed right now so I can everybody wake up, because I know it's going to be better. So that's how I'm.
Dr. Kim, can I just have a drink of you every day? You are incredible. Boy, we are lucky to have you on this phone call.
Oh, bless your heart.
Miss Farron, what do you think about that? Where do you see the silver linings in the situation?
I really see an opportunity for And I'm going to talk about the pillars in our community, you know, the folks that are here and know what it takes to have to push up against inequity, you know, and have 10 years and 15 years and, you know, then figure out how to pass that on so the next generation can do that. But where I feel like we can help promote what that hope looks like is how we continue to partner and collaborate with one another, because our young people watch us. It's so interesting. We're doing, you know, work around SEL alignment, you know, and you know, we have to example in front of folks, our young people particularly, the skill. And if we want our future to look collaborative, right? If the future leaders that are going to step into these places when we're, you know, going off doing some other things, there's an opportunity to show them where we showed up to collaborate on their behalf to make sure they had what they needed. And I'm going to continue to push that it can't just be one idea, one entity, one organization. Here is an opportunity for us to align, you know, not just in funding sector and education sector, but in health, you know, in higher ed, in early learning, in housing. There's this opportunity here right now for us to wrap around our community in where we are experts at. And when we see the book about 2020, you know, Time magazine comes out with the book on 2020, and we look through, our young people are going to be able to look through that and say, I remember when Pam showed up and, you know, MDC was able to do this, you know, for my family. I remember when we were going through this and Tacoma Urban League was able to help us get devices. You know, I heard that we were marching, you know, at Olympia to talk about broadband as a public utility, all birthed out of this pandemic, you know, and crisis. So for me, I see, you know, twofold: us continuing as, you know, pillars in our community or leaders in the community to talk, include, be inclusive around how we are trying to restructure and reform systems that's been in here for a minute. And then I see our next generation folks, you know, 30 something, 40 something, that's looking back at that Time magazine book. I remember when I saw that happen in my community. All the folks in my Tacoma community roll their sleeves up and come together to make sure we could become and grow up into the leaders we know as adults our young people can be, you know. And so to me, that's what gives me hope. We have an opportunity to sow seeds, to water them, to come together, to make sure that folks in their expert spaces can come and bring resource to that. And the gaps are being closed so that we can heal, you know, and move forward and build stronger, better, stronger foundation. So that's what makes, you know, me hopeful for in the midst of all of this. That's what I keep my eye towards. What we're doing now, that's going to affect how we show up, you know, in the future and what happens in our future.
Ms. Farron, I think you should be an author of that 2020 book that you were talking about.
I'll do it.
Yes, you nailed it. You totally nailed it. Well, I'm going to turn to and ask Tawana if she has anything to add before I have Pam tuck us in for the night. I'll take that as a no. So Pam, I want to hear from you as we wrap up our 20th segment of Straight Talk.
The 20th session in 2020. How about that?
Wow.
You know what gives me hope? What I am encouraged by are the types of conversations and daylighting of issues like we had tonight. Listening to Dr. Kim and Farron talk about education and beyond, not just moving forward, but it's more than just that issue right now. That is far more global in scope. And just listening to both of you is encouraging. And I'm going to say this. I'm going to say, in spite of everything that we have encountered this year, unprecedented all over the place, I am convicted that 2020 is the year in which we learn how to be kinder to one another, how we learn to be more flexible, more nimble, more innovative, more creative, and that the box that we've operated in before is just gone, because it has no application anymore. You know, we would always say thinking outside of the box is gone, and that we are learning a completely new way to live and be in community. And so with that, you tickle me when you say tuck us in for the night. But with that, I am just going to say thank you again to our guests. I appreciate your making the time for these conversations. Thank you to my colleague, Twina Nobles. Thank you to our moderator and to our tech. And thank you to everyone who joined in, whether it was live streaming or you came in on the Zoom call. We greatly appreciate your stepping in. And just know all of our calls are recorded, so you can always go back and listen. And with that, thank you everybody and have a good night.